One, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahabashai, Bahashem, Recha Kodash. I want to give double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, because those are the men who I learned the truth from through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahabashai. Yahweh is the true name of the God of Israel. Yahabashai is who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, but his one and only true name is Yahabashai. And pretty much the last couple of videos I did, not the World War III videos, but the time of the Gentiles, including this lesson, I was inspired by Apostle Tahar because he brought it up in his recent videos about the time of the Gentiles, measuring the times diligently. So what inspired me to do this lesson is the fact that how do we know that we're in the time of the Gentiles? Well, read Daniel, the 2nd and the 7th chapter. All right. The scriptures also talk about that the Edomites will be ruling when Yahushua returns back, because there's going to be a war in heaven. Meaning when Yahushua comes back, he's going to fight against the Edomites and all the heathen nations that are assembled under the Edomites. All right. Because when you look at any particular nation in secular history that was in power, they got taken out by a stronger nation with a stronger military might. So that's what this lesson is going to be about, that we're in the time of the Gentiles and measuring the time diligently. All right. It's not going to be a long lesson, Lord willing. So this is Luke 21 and 24. It says, and they, referring to the children of Israel, shall fall by the edge of the sword. Right? That's what happened. That's why we went into captivity so many times. Right? And shall be led away captive into all nations. Now, this is secular history. This took place during the siege of Jerusalem from 66 AD to 74 AD. Now, under Titus, he led the end to the Israelite state, because Titus had over 60,000 Roman soldiers besiege Jerusalem, to the point where we couldn't eat, we couldn't drink, we didn't have the freedom or liberty to exit out of Jerusalem. So what ended up happening is, once Titus defeated the Israelites, he ransacked the temple, the second temple, and they destroyed it. And that's what Yahushua prophesied about when you read Matthew, the 24th chapter, which, by the way, the wicked Pharisees, the wicked scribes, the Sadducees, all the Sadducees was wicked because they didn't believe in the afterlife or resurrection. They didn't believe in angel and demons. And a lot of the Sadducees were high priests and, priests, all right? They lacked faith in Yahushua because it was a gift. It wasn't given unto them because they're not a part of the elect. None of the Sadducees, all right? Now, what ended up, so the Israelites that rejected Yahushua during the ancient Roman Empire, they took that, in the wrong way, accusing Yahushua, saying that he would destroy the second temple, but what he really was talking about was 70 AD, the siege of Jerusalem, because under the Flavian dynasty, which consisted of Vespasian and his two sons, Titus and Domitian, all right, they put an end to the Israelite estate, as I was saying, all right? So that's what happened. So when you time skip, you had over 1 million Israelites that fled out of Jerusalem, and they fled into the interiors of what we know as Africa, or the land of Ham. And then shortly after that, you had all these different slave trades that took place. The transatlantic slave trade being the main one, but that's not the only slave trade, all right? You had a major slave trade. First of all, the first slave trade was to Brazil, Colombia, South and Central America. You had the transatlantic slave trade. That's what everybody knows, right? You had an Indian Ocean slave trade, right? Israelites being shipped to like the Asian continents, the South Pacific islands like Madagascar and other islands, right? You had the sub-Saharan slave trade, British, Dutch, Iberian slave trade. You had a lot of slave trades that took place. So we was led away captive into all nations, going back to what? Deuteronomy 28 and 64. It said that we was going to be scattered and pretty much become idol worshippers. Why? Because we learned the way of the heathen. All the heathen nations are idol worshippers and fornicators. All right? None of the heathen nations are righteous. They may do good deeds, but they still a bunch of pagans. All right? So it says, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles. Our land is trodden down of the Gentiles, is divided by line. Who rules over our land today? The Edomites. That's why all the prime ministers are what? Zionists. All right? A person that's a Zionist, they support the state of Israel. And that's pursuing to what? Ezekiel 36 and 5. It said that the Idumeans, which is the Greek way of saying Edom, will be ruling that land. But the land is divided by line because you have Arabs in the form of Palestinians that are there. You have Philistine Jews. You have other heathen nations that are within the land of Israel, which is why that land is not a blessed land, flowing with milk and honey, meaning to have an abundance of resources. They need a lot of aid from America. All right. So it says, and ultimately, who are the Gentile nations? First of all, who's the 17 heathen nations, which you see on the screen, Numbers 2 through 18. All right. So we were trodden down by them. In the past, even up until right now, we still trodden down. All you got to do is just go on YouTube and type in black people in Yemen, black people in Africa, black people this, black people that. They still being sold into slavery as birthday gifts, which links up with Joel the 3rd chapter. That happened over 700 or 500, 600 years ago, but it's still going on. All right. It goes on to say, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. So we're in the time of the Gentiles. All right. Because the scriptures, through the mouth of the prophets, it gives you a timeline of what particular heathen nations will be ruling before Yahushua comes back. So we're past the era of the Neo-Assyrian Babylonian Empire. All right. We're past the point of the Medo-Persian Empire. We're past the point of the Greek Empire. We're past the part of the first beast, which is the ancient Roman Empire. But we understand that when you read Revelation 13, the first beast, its deadly wound was healed. When did that take place? The Renaissance. Up until right now, Spain got its power, so forth and so on, right? So now the second beast, which copies the first beast, is what? America, all right? So this deals with what? The last days. What nation was ruling over the Greek-Roman, the Greco-Roman Empire? Both empires, the Edomites, the so-called white man and sea line, all right? So that's how we know that we're in the end. That's why Matthew 24 and 3, it says what? What shall be the sign of that coming in of the end of the world? What heathen nation will be ruling according to the Old and New Testament? It would be the Edomites. So that's how we know that we're in the end. All right. So pursuant to Daniel, the 2nd chapter, this is where we at in the biblical timeline, reality-wise. We're at the part of the 10 toes. All right, the divided kingdoms headed by the revived Roman Empire, which is America. All right. So now let's read this. So this is why I typed in. I always spell it wrong. I don't care. Daniel 2, statue medals get stronger and stronger, representing the military. Now, this is something a lot of people don't know. The first brother that I heard say this years ago was the brother, well, now he's an elder, Shaman. All right, from the New York camp. So it says in the prophecy of Daniel 2, the metals of the statue, right? The metals of the statue. Because what do you notice? Oh, the head of gold, silver, brass, iron. Iron is the strongest density metal there. That's why the Roman Empire, they had the strongest military. That's why all nations was quiet before them, because of their military might. So anytime you had a strong nation that was in rulership, they got taken down by another nation that had a stronger military might, which goes into the metals, right? So now check this out. So it says, in prophecy of Daniel 2, the metals of the statue represent a chronological succession of world empires that generally increase in physical hardness. Gold is not hard, all right? Silver is stronger than gold. Brass is stronger than silver. Iron is stronger than all three of them, right? Notice how the iron, technically, it lasts the longest. And then you got the feet of miry clay, right? It goes on to say, empires that generally increase in physical hardness and military strength while decreasing intrinsic value and spiritual quality, right? It says, this progression from gold to iron illustrates the development of military power characterized by tougher metals used for more effective weaponry and more aggressive crushing conquest, right? Progression of strength and military power. As Daniel's interpretation moves down the statue, the minerals transition from softer, right, from gold, more precious metals, to harder, like iron, more durable ones, right? Gold is not durable. If you know about the jewelry business, the jewelry game, 24 karat gold, first of all, which is 99.9 purity, it's extremely soft. You could probably break it in half with your hand. You could bend it with your hand. That's why here in America, you know, a lot of people, they get like 14 karat gold, which is about over 50% gold, and it's mixed with other metals. You know, 10 karat, little lesser quality of gold, but it's more durable, all right? You go to Central and South America, like in Colombia, their standard is 18 karat gold because they don't have 14 karat and 10 karat gold. They either got 18 karat or 24 karat or just pure 999 silver, all right? Continuing on, it says, head of gold, Babylon, represented King Nebuchadnezzar's empire, which, you know, a lot of people, y'all forget that Nebuchadnezzar, he wasn't actually a Babylonian. He was an Assyrian, all right? It's called the Neo-Assyrian Babylonian Empire. It was spearheaded by Assyrians, all right? It says, unparalleled in wealth and glory, but the softest in terms of pure physical hardness. The chests and arms of silver, which represent the joint empire of the Medo Persians, right? Though less valuable than gold, silver is harder. This empire succeeded Babylon through military expansion and a vast administrative system. Belly and thighs of bronze, which represents the Greek Empire under Alexander the Great, and then later on his generals, right, when he died. Bronze is stronger than silver and gold. It signifies the military prowess of Alexander the Great's empire, which used bronze implements for swift, expansive conquest that ruled over all the earth. Next one is legs of iron, which represents the first beast, which is Rome, right? It says iron is the hardest of all solid metals in the statue. It represents the Roman Empire, which was known for its unmatched military discipline and ability to crush and smash all opposition. Rome's military strength was physically reflected in its advanced iron weaponry and infrastructure. All right. The climax of strength and fragility. The final stage of the statue, the feat of iron mixed with clay, represents a transition from ununified military might to a divided state. Now, when you read Matthew 12 and 26, It says, if Satan be divided against Satan, how shall his kingdom stand? You read 2 Corinthians 2 and 11, it talks about a Satan-like man, Satan's physical counterpart. Who is Satan's physical counterpart? The Edomites, the so-called white man in ELAM. All right? You see that all of them are divided. You got America, you got Russia, you got France, you got Germany. You got all these different parts, right? But they're the same nation that's ruling over these areas. While it retains the strength of iron, which represents military and industrial power, it also partly brittle due to the clay. So it says, iron aspect symbolizes residual military might, coercive government strength, and technological advancement. Clay aspect represents inherent weakness, such as social unrest, incompatible ideologies, or the common people who undermine the ability to act with unified iron-like strength. Right? So that's why it's miry clay, pretty much, because everybody's divided. So they're not unified. So it ain't iron. It says lack of adhesion. Just as iron and clay do not bond, these later kingdoms try to unite through alliances and marriage, but remain fundamentally divided and unstable, which also links up with Revelation 17, where it says that the beast, which represents EU, the NATO, they're gonna burn the whore, which is America, because they're divided. All right. So that's pretty much it. That's it. And then we know Yahushua is that great millstone. All right. Now we're gonna get into Daniel a little bit. Daniel, the first 8 verses, because it deals with the topic of being in the time of the Gentiles, measuring the time diligently, right? So I just typed in 4 beasts of Daniel, right? In Daniel chapter 7, Daniel sees a vision of 4 beasts emerging from the sea, representing 4 successive world kingdoms. A lion with eagle's wings represents what? The Neo-Assyrian Babylonian Empire. A bear with ribs representing Medio Persia. A 4-winged / 4-headed leopard representing Greece, and a terrifying 10-horned beast with iron teeth represents Rome. These powers are followed by the Most High's kingdom. So these particular heathen nations will be ruling, and then Yahushua will come and set up his kingdom, everlasting kingdom. All right. It says, yep. So, I mean, you pretty much get the point. We're going to get into it. So that's it with that. Now, check this out. I typed in, do the beast and Daniel represent the end of the world, right? AI overview. In the biblical book of Daniel, the 4 beasts represent a series of human earthly kingdoms that precede the final eternal establishment of the Most High, or establishment of the kingdom of the Most High. So these heathen nations, they will be ruling, aka you got the term time of the Gentiles, right? It says, while they generally symbolize the progression of world powers from Daniel's era toward a final judgment, modern interpretations vary on whether they specifically... Okay, I'm not reading that. So y'all get the point. All right. And then it goes on to say the 4 kingdoms. The lion with eagle's wings represents the Babylonian Empire and Nebuchadnezzar. The bear with 3 ribs symbolizes the Medio Persian Empire, which conquered Babylon. The 3rd beast, the leopard with 4 heads and 4 wings, represents the Grecian Empire under Alexander the Great, which was later divided to 4 parts. His 4 generals, Lysimachus, Cassander, Ptolemy, and Seleucus. The dreadful beast with 10 horns is identified with Rome, all right, which is talk about their military might and immense power, all right? So there you go. So now let's read a little bit about it. This is Daniel 7 and 1. So it says vision of the 4 beasts, right? Because we're dealing with the topic of being in the time of the Gentiles. So it says, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. See, the thing is, you could have a dream, but that don't necessarily mean your dream is a vision. All right, like you got people, they quick to, oh, I had a dream, but that don't mean it's an actual vision, right? Sometimes, well, a lot of times, the Lord can send an angel in your dream to give you a warning. You know, that's actually recently happened to me about a particular individual, and it turned out the dream, it was spiritual, because really it was like a vision. All right. Anyways, it says, then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. You know, this is kind of similar to like when brothers do videos. You know, they do videos about maybe something prophetic concerning Jacob's trouble, end time prophecy, right? The Lord giving them a warning about a woman or particular individuals, right? Verse 2, Daniel spake and said, I saw my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of the heavens strove upon the great sea, and 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse from one another, meaning different from one another, right? That's why the beasts are different. And even concerning Daniel, the 2nd chapter, which that deals with Nebuchadnezzar's dream, this is dealing with Daniel's own dream, right? It says, the first was like a lion and had eagle's wings, which represents the Neo-Assyrian Babylonian Empire. It's talking about that griffin, all right? It's similar to the Sphinx, but it's different, all right? They got a man head. They got like an Assyrian man head, right? With a lion body, snake tail, and wings, right? It says, the first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it, right? Let's read a little bit about this. I just typed in Daniel 7:4 meaning. Now, this don't mean, you know, I'm getting breakdowns from the AI overview. Obviously, I learned from the apostles of Great Millstone, and with that information through the Holy Spirit, I verify whether the AI overview is giving the correct information or not. Daniel 7:4 describes the first of 4 beasts in Daniel's vision, lion with eagle's wings. It says symbolizing the word Neo, it means new, by the way, Babylonian Empire from 605 through 539 BC. 539 BC, that's when the Medo-Persian Empire took them over. It says under King Nebuchadnezzar, right? So that's what Daniel 7:4 is talking about. It's talking about the Neo-Assyrian Babylonian Empire. All right, Nebuchadnezzar, he was not a Babylonian. He was an Assyrian. It says, the lion represents royal power. The eagle's wings symbolize rapid conquest and its transformation. Wings plucked, human heart given, represents Nebuchadnezzar's humiliation and eventual restoration, acknowledging the Most High's sovereignty. All right. It says, key elements and meanings. Like a lion symbolizes Babylon, often represented by lions, emphasizing its strength, majesty, and ferocity. Eagle's wings represents the speed and swiftness of Babylonian conquest under Nebuchadnezzar, as well as the height of its power. Wings plucked / torn off indicates the weakening of the empire and a check on its rapid growth. It says stood on 2 feet / heart was given, refers to the humbling of Nebuchadnezzar. And then they mentioned Daniel 4. It says where he ceased acting like a beastly conqueror and recognized the supreme power of the Most High, receiving humanity understanding. He just acknowledged the Most High. All right, the Most High humbled him. They acknowledge that the God of Israel, Yahweh, he's the true living God, not whatever gods they worship. All right. It says synonyms / contextual phrases, right? The first beast represents the Babylonian Empire. It said lion with eagle's wings, symbol of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Talk about that griffin. Winged lion of Babylon, cultural representation. All right. So there you go. Let's also read this. I typed in Daniel 7:4, Assyrian griffin, right? Because that's what it is. It's a griffin, right? It says in Daniel 7:4, the prophet, referring to Daniel, sees a vision of 4 beasts, the first of which is described as a lion with eagle's wings. It says this imagery strongly resonates with ancient Near Eastern, particularly the Assyrian and Babylonian art and mythology, where winged lions or griffins were commonly used to represent divine power, kingship, and protection. Contextual connections and meaning. Identification as Babylon, while similar to Assyrian iconography, most commentators identify the lion with eagle's wings in this context as the Babylonian Empire under Nebuchadnezzar, as it was the dominant power during Daniel's time. Symbolism of wings. The eagle's wings signify the rapid speed of the Babylonian conquest. All right? So, I mean, you get it. I pretty much read all that already. All right. So now let's go to verse 5. It says, and behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, arise, devour much flesh. So this is referring to the bear, which is a joint empire between the Medes and the Persians. The Medes being descendants of Japhet, the Persians being descendants of Elam. It was a joint empire. All right. The stronger nation would be the Persians. All right, but it was a joint empire. So now let's deal with Daniel 7:5. So AI overview, right? In Daniel 7:5, the second beast, a bear-like creature, represents the Medo-Persian Empire from 539, when they took down the Neo-Assyrian Babylonian Empire, and they was ruling from that point all the way to 331 BC. It is described as being raised up on one side, indicating the Persian side was stronger than the Medes. The 3 ribs in its mouth represents major conquests, often cited as Babylon, Lydia, and Egypt, establishing its dominance. All right. It says key details of the second beast, Daniel 7:5. It represents the Medo-Persian Empire. The bear depicts a less majestic but more crushing, strong, and slow-moving power compared to the first beast. All right. And this is why even when you read Daniel the 2nd chapter, once again, it's silver. It's a stronger metal than gold, representing what? They had a stronger military might. All right. It says raised on one side reflects the imbalance in power, where the Persian Empire was more dominant than the Median Empire or Medes. 3 ribs in the mouth represents the 3 primary major conquests: Babylon, which they took them down; Lydia, which they took them down in 546 BC; and Egypt, which they took them down in 525 BC. Arise, devour much flesh signifies the aggressive expansion and devouring nature of the empire. All right. So we done with that. Now we should all know this, because we go into Hellenism and Hellenization and Hellene and all the different Hellene words so much. You know, you should definitely know Daniel 7:6. Daniel 7:6. And after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which is talking about Alexander the Great, right? And there's also a photo of him. I forget if it's on like a coin. I should have had the photo in this video, but it depicts Alexander wearing like a leopard. I believe it's like a hat. Like he killed the leopard, and I think he got like a hat on. I forget, but you'll be able to search it up. All you got to do is just go on Google and type in Alexander the Great leopard. All right. After this, I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given over to it. So you got to read the book of Maccabees, first Maccabees. When Alexander the Great died, his power, meaning all the territories he conquered, it got split, meaning divided into 4 by his major generals. Now, people argue whether it's Antigonus or Lysimachus, but through the Holy Spirit, it's Lysimachus, Cassander, Ptolemy, and Seleucus. All right, that's the 4 heads of the dominion. Because when Alexander died, his power, right, all his success at war, everything he conquered, it got divided amongst those 4 generals mainly. There was a bunch of generals, but those are the main 4 heads. All right. After this, I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, which is talking about the Roman Empire, the iron, which is the most dense metal, meaning what? They had the strongest military strength. They had immense power. Nobody could fuck with them. Nobody could take them down, right? It says, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly. Iron are cut straight through, gold, silver, and brass. All right. It goes on to say, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly, and it had iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. All right. So there you go. Now, ultimately, it's talking about them 10 Germanic tribes. Let me see if I got the yeah, see, because you can also link this up with Revelation. All right. So it says, and it had 10 horns. Yep. So I'm going to read that last part again. I'm going to read it from the top again. Daniel 7:7. After this, I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly. Talk about the Roman Empire, a.k.a. the first beast, right? That's spoken about in Revelation. It talks about a first beast, then it talks about a second beast that copies the first beast. Because the second beast, which is America, which the next verse going to go into, the little horn, is the revived Roman Empire. So, of course, it's going to copy or imitate the first beast, because it's the same nation that's ruling with the same way of running their government. That's why there's so many different similarities between Greece, Rome, and America. It's the same nation ruling, the Edomites. So I kind of jumped the gun with that. It goes on to say, after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it. Meaning they had an immensely strong army, right? It says, and it was diverse, meaning different from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. The 10 horns represents what? The European Union. All right. So now let's go back. You got the 10 toes, the 10 horns, it's all the same thing. Verse 8, it says, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them, right, another little horn. So you got the 10 horns, which represents the European Union, right? And then it says, behold, there came up among them another little horn. The little horn is referring to America. All right. Now let's read a little bit about this. So this is Daniel 7 to 8. I typed in America, AI, right? It says, I just want to hit key points because obviously, you know, they're going to go off. And by the way, I know you see that word Antichrist there. When you read in 1 John, the 2nd chapter, there's more than one Antichrist. An Antichrist is simply just an unbeliever. All right? An Israelite can be considered an Antichrist for not calling upon the true names of the Messiah and not teaching the correct gospel and doctrine. Continuing on, while often interpreted historically as a Roman power, right, which America, it copies the first beast. The second beast that you read about in Revelation 13, it imitates or it copies, meaning it runs its government just like the first beast, which is Rome, because America is the revived Roman Empire. It says, some interpret this as a modern end times entity arising within a global system, sometimes speculated to involve a U.S. influence. All right? The little horn is America. It says, see, let's go down. Let's go down here. America's connection. Some popular speculative prophetic interpretations attempt to link the United States or a North American power bloc to the end time scenarios described in Daniel 7 and Revelation. But the Bible does not explicitly, well, you got to remember, you know, there was no such thing as America. So obviously it's not going to have the word America in it. That's modern vocabulary. It don't mean that the prophets didn't have visions about these future lands, right? Because things change, right? Countries, you got over 196 countries, but the scriptures say what? There's only 18 nations in the Bible. So what we going to go with? The ancient way, the ancient names, or we going to go with this modern shit, right? So that's pretty much it. With that, what I typed in here, I said America became a nation out of the EU nations because it says what? You had the 10 horns, and then it says after the 10 horns, you have a little horn. So that's going to that. It says the United States of America became an independent nation in 1776 by separating from Great Britain. This is why it's known as a little horn, because it got its power from one of the horns, right? Which is Great Britain. They got their independence from them. It says a European power, one of the 10 horns. That's why I call it a little horn, because you got your power from one of the big horns, right? It says a European power, not from the modern European Union, EU. The U.S. was formed from 13 British colonies that fought for independence. Okay, this is why it's a little horn. Formerly recognized by European powers like France, Spain, and the Netherlands. All right. So there you go. So we can read that again. Daniel 7 and 8 again. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them, the 10 horns, another little horn. The little horn is referring to America because America got its independence from Great Britain, which is one of the other horns. It says, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots, and behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Which is going into the pride of America. America being prideful of its military, being proud to be an American. You know, that prideful, arrogant spirit of the American people, mainly the American Edomite, because that's who people are copying. That's who people put their trust in. Even in Revelation 13:11, the 2 horns that speak like a lamb, representing the Flavian and the Patricians, which is the modern day Democrat and Republicans. They always speak smooth words like a lamb, but they're dragons because they got a new world order agenda. All right. So that's what it's talking about with that last part. So I'm gonna just finish it off with this. 2 Ezra 9 and 1. He answered me then and said, measure thou the time diligently in itself. So these guys that's talking about we got 30 years left, we got 1,000 years left. Like if we gonna have to die and come back in a reincarnation, learn all over again and teach, that's not biblical because we measuring the times. We understand that we're in the time of the Gentiles, all right? The Edomites is the last heathen nation to rule before the kingdom of heaven is established. That's why it says real quick in 2nd Ezra 6 and 9, for Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth, all right? So who's currently ruling? The revived Roman Empire, the Edomites. So now let's go back. Diligently in itself. So how do you do that? You link the current events with the Bible prophecies to understand the time period you're living in. The time period we're living in is the end of the age, which prophesied that the Edomites will be in rulership. So currently we're at the part with the 10 toes. All right, the 10 toes. Esau's kingdom is divided, so it can't stand. That's why you got global conflicts going on. Right? You got these nations getting mad at America. They're getting mad at Israel because both of those nations is dragging other countries into a global conflict. That's what a world war is. All right. Now everybody's being affected by the Iranians, which are the Persians, telling people they can't use the Strait of Hormuz. Now there's an energy crisis, right? Gas is getting ready to go up. So that's how we do it. We link secular history and current events with the Bible prophecies to understand the time period we live in. We know Yahushua get ready to come back. It says, and when thou seest part of the signs past, meaning the prophecies, which I've told thee before through the prophets, then thou shalt understand that it is the very same time wherein the highest, which is Yahushua, will begin to visit the world which he made. When you read Colossians, the 1st chapter, it tells you that Yahushua created everything according to the will or design of the Heavenly Father. According to his rules and regulations, everything was created through Yahushua. All right? So Yahushua, he get ready to come back. And he's that great millstone. So that's pretty much it. You know, Lord willing, you was edified by the lesson. Shalom.